It's a big question, and if I had to go for a simple answer, I guess I'd define violence as coercive power exercised on the body of another person. But the problem is, it's such a vast topic that one could consider it basic to all societies, that coercive power exercised over the bodies of others. And in that sense, it's one of those big explanations that is then in contention with, I don't know, explanations of society in terms of material production, Marxism, or the existential matters of belief and religion. And you could construct histories of society which would be endless on any one of those bases. Just to give an example, from the beginning of the 20th century, it seems to me that Max Weber used that kind of definition of violence to suggest that violence and therefore force underlay all societies, even when they were translated into either charismatic authority or into bureaucratic power. But Emil Durkheim, writing at almost the same time, didn't take that view, and what he tended to emphasize was the peaceful interaction of people in societies through the social contract and the division of labor. And in a sense, both of them are right. So how does one translate this question of violence into a manageable, a workable research project for a centre such as yours? And I would say that it's partly, firstly, perhaps a question of how one looks at violence in peacetime, in ordinary societies. And it seems to me that there, violence is omnipresent, but what happens normally, normatively, if you like, is that it's translated into institutional power, it's internalized in terms of norms and values. And therefore, the moments when it really becomes important and operative in peacetime is when it escapes from those institutionalized forms, when it overrides those norms. Just to give an example, I long wondered about the genocide in Rwanda, because it seemed to me you couldn't explain that genocide by war. It happened in a society which was ostensibly peaceful, but clearly there was a breakdown in terms of the normal restraining or channeling mechanisms of violence to produce a genocide. So one could study those moments where, as it were, peace breaks down and violence flares in abnormal ways in peacetime societies. But the other question, and I would imagine the other half of the work of a centre such as this, is war. And it seems to me the distinctive thing about war is that then violence becomes absolutely operative, and it's the medium of war. If we just go back to Clausewitz's definition, war is forcing the enemy to obey your will, to conform to your will. And you do that through the explicit visitation of violence, that coercive power, on the bodies of others. And in that sense, therefore, it seems to me, violence has a different valency, a different place in wartime than it does in peacetime. It's one of the things which precisely defines war. But it still leaves one with the question of the different manifestations of violence in war, because we know that not all wars are the same. And again, Clausewitz, I think, is interesting there, because he had the notion of limiting factors. He recognized, writing after the French Revolution, that war, in a sense, could expand until it was total. But normally it didn't do that. And so he was interested in the limiting factors. So it seems to me one of the key questions in war is when violence is limited and when it becomes unlimited. And that brings us to the question, I guess, of total war. And increasingly my feeling there is that total war isn't a kind of trajectory from some time in the past to the 20th century. I think actually that probably all societies have the capacity for a total or a totalizing war within the constraints of their own technologies, economies, and so on. And therefore, for me, a very important question in a centre that's studying the history of violence is the nature of different types of war and the degree of totality that they entail.